Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you are looking at this week's video, and this week we are continuing our study in the book of First Peter, and you'll notice that we are about ready to diagram chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. Again, still under the larger heading of living within our community, and this particular section here, 13 through 17, is under the concept or the theme of be submissive. So as we push forward and look at the text as a whole, you have the command to be submissive here in verse 13. And then obviously as Peter works through his argument, you will see how the rest of the verses, specifically 14 through 17, how they in and of themselves support, come alongside, offer syntax by way of grammatical constructions to support that particular command to be submissive. Well, let's go ahead and look at how we might break down the text so that we can, again, get a good idea, as I try to do, get a good idea as to how we may preach or teach this particular section. So first, you'll see submit. And here Peter is saying to submit specifically to every human creation. Why would we want to do that? Well, now we have dia plus the accusative, so we have because of the Lord. So it's the Lord that's not only our relationship with the Lord, but it's the Lord then has put that particular human creation over us. Well, let's see what that might look like. Well, he says here, whether you submit to the king. So that would be one governmental authority that's over us. And that's why I say here, whether you submit to the king as the one who is in authority. Okay, we have that. Or he says, whether you submit to governors. And the governors are the ones who are sent by him. Ultimately for two purposes. One, for the purpose of the punishment of evildoers. And notice the de here, that is because we are changing people group from evildoers to those who do good. So the concept here again is verses 13 and 14 are related, and what he's demonstrating here again is the concept of submission, specifically to those who are in authority over us. So what I have here then is another reason. So verse 15 begins with the hati. All right, hati is our conjunction that ultimately, again, provides another reason why I submit. And that's because this, we're going to hit that in just a minute, this is the will of God. What is the this referencing? And that's why I say it points forward, because this, by doing good, so here's our participle of means, by doing good, it's ultimately to silence the ignorance of foolish men. In other words, Peter's basically saying here, submit. Why? Well, ultimately, yes, it's the will of God. But what specifically is that will of God? By doing good, I can silence the ignorance of foolish men. But again, notice, he says here, doing good. That's the same as chapter 2, okay, verses 11 and 12. All right. Then we also have here descriptions. So he's describing how we, basically how we are to act. All right. We are free people, but we're not using that freedom for evil or for basically for doing sin. But we're demonstrating that we are slaves of God in a sense that we are possessed by God. We are his. And so we act and we behave in such a way that's representative of our relationship to God. And then finally in verse 17, he uses several commands, again, I think to reiterate what our responsibility is to be submissive as we live within our community. Number one, we honor all people. Then he brings two things: love the family of believers and fear God. Then he wraps up with honor the king. Let me bring two text boxes in to kind of help us here. If you notice the inner pair, which would be the loving the family of believers and fearing God, that inner pair is part of a chiasm, which is basically structured out to in and then back out. Well, the inner pair that I just bracketed, those commands are regarding the relationships that we have with believers in God. Those are more prominent. Those are the commands that Peter is kind of focusing on. Then the commands that are outside of that inner pair, which are the outer pair, that's both uses of honor here, those commands are in regards to the non-Christian or the societal relationships. So Peter wants us to still have a great relationship with those that are in the community, but all the while we have that, there's an importance here to love believers and fear God. All right, so how do I wrap all of this up? Well, I still think Peter is urging, again, going back to verses 11 and 12, I am urging you, says Peter, to do what? Well, submit. Submit to every human creature because of the Lord, our relationship with the Lord, as well as what he has placed over us. And of course, this is the will of God. Then he wraps up with the 4 commands: honor all people, love the family of God, fear God, and honor the king. If these are going well, if we are loving the family of God and we are fearing God, certainly bringing honor to all people and honor to the king, we won't have any problem doing that. So Peter, again, living in your community, being submissive. Trust you have a great week. That was verses 13 through 17. We will push on to the latter part of chapter 2 next week. Have a great week.